parked on the side. I had to drive him out to your place.
No one behind me.
Go and get it.
Yeah, go and get it, Jen. Here you are.
Bye.
Jen.
I don't need it. He's stricken us.
Behave yourself. Will you? How you girls going back there? He's lovely. Oh, wouldn't he ever get it? Oh.
There's more seats up there.
No, we're good under the tree. Thanks.
Hey, true blue, don't say you've gone. Say you've knocked off for a smoke out, and you'll be back later on. Hey, true blue, hey, true blue, give it to me straight, face to face. Are you really disappearing? Just another dying race. Hey, true blue. True blue. Is it me and you? Is it mom and dad? Is it a cockatoo? Is it standing by your mate when he's in a fight? Or just Vegemite? True blue, I'm asking you. Hey, true blue, can you bear the load? Will you tie it up with wire just to keep the show on the road? Hey, true blue. Hey, true blue. Now be fair dinkum. Is your heart still there? If they sell us out like sponge cake, do you really care? Hey, true blue. True blue. Is it me and you? Is it mom and dad? Is it a cockatoo? Is it standing by your mate when she's in a fight? Or just Vegemite? True blue, I'm asking you. True blue, is it me and you? Is it mom and dad? Is it a cockatoo? Is it standing by your mate when he's in a fight? Or just Vegemite? True blue, true blue.
You might like to be seated now. How nice does that look? Just going to start off with a reading now. The measure of a man is not determined by his show of outward strength, or the volume of his voice, or the thunder of his actions or of his intellect or academic abilities. It is seen rather in the terms of the love that he has for his family and everyone else, the strength of his commitments, the genuineness of his friendships, the sincerity of his purpose, and the quiet courage of his convictions. For fun and laughter and joy and happiness, he gives to family and others his love of life, his adventures, and his honesty, and the contentment with what he had. Does that sound like Jack Harrison? Harris, not Harrison, sorry. I'm having a bit of trouble with the pages today, flipping. Good morning everyone, my name is Pam Herald, for those of you who don't know me. And sadly the rules of COVID have only allowed a limited number of family and friends to be here today. But it is what it is and we must obey the rules, mustn't we? So as this service is being live streamed, I welcome everyone looking on today as well. So today we say goodbye to someone who has been in your lives for many years. And I bet there wouldn't be too many around the Currumbara district, or even beyond, that hasn't heard of John Patterson Harris, known as Jack Harris, and to many he was just Uncle Jack. He died peacefully at Carinya Aged Care here in Currumbara on the 15th of October, after being a resident there for 12 months. Jack was 96 years of age, only 12 days away from his 97th birthday. He was so sad we could no longer stay at home and look after himself, and he very reluctantly had to go into care, but he quickly came around to the thinking that it wasn't so bad after all, as he was very well looked after and he was a very popular person with staff and residents alike. And I think this might be a good time to thank everyone at Carinya for the care and devotion shown to Jack while he was a resident there. Everyone made sure that his last months were something special for him. We're going to try and do justice today to the memory of Jack, and there is so much to the character that he was. Just a few words that come to mind to me. He was humorous, he was adventurous, mischievous, charitable, helpful, neighbourly, generous, and he was very quirky. And he never missed a beat when it came to family. There are so many words to describe Jack, and no doubt there are many stories to tell. And I bet there are one or two that cannot be told here today. I won't mention the animal skulls that were taken down the main street here in Currumbara during the night and placed in many places along the way. That's a story to tell at another time. Alan? Family members are to step forward shortly and relate their memories of Jack. There's so many stories and so many funny ones. I met some of the family yesterday and we sat around the table laughing about some of those stories. I wish Jack had put them all down in a book. It would have made for very entertaining reading. Inevitably, you will find the world a poorer place without Jack in it, but it will always be a richer place because he was once in it. So the joy of having him in our lives may indeed be lost, but the joy of having had a relationship with him and the delight of having memories is never lost. There never has been and never will be anyone in the world like Jack, and I'm sure he will live in your memories for many years to come. All living things are subject to death. It is the basis of growth. Through evolution, in the course of millions upon millions of deaths, humanity has evolved. And we carry this inheritance, but we as human individuals have a more personal contribution to make in the value of our own lives, as Jack certainly did. So today we are here not just to mourn Jack's death, but also to celebrate his life, and what a life it was. So let's go back in time now to when he was born in Currumbara on the 1st of November 1924 to parents John and Mary. He had 6 siblings, sisters Myrtle, Dorothy, June and Lorna, and 2 brothers Ron and Henry. Jack has outlived all of them. He never married, but he was a special Uncle Jack to 17 nieces and nephews, and how he loved them all. He did his 8 years of schooling at a little school called Bellevue, which was in the Lock area. And then he worked his entire life until the age of 65 when he finally retired. And you'll hear more about that shortly. He loved socialising. In fact, he really liked people. In his later years, his diary was filled with engagements for having dinner somewhere nearly every night, it turned out, so he didn't really need to do much cooking for himself, not that he really wanted to. His last dog companion was Jill, and how Jack loved that dog. But I'm told she's gone to another good home with one of his nieces. I don't need to tell you that he loved all the outdoor things, like hunting and fishing and shooting, and then there was his artwork, which he took up later in life. And I mustn't forget his beloved Tigers. He was not happy that they didn't get to win the premiership this year. On the 24th of August 2015, he received an award from the Lions Association for outstanding service to the community. That was something Jack was very proud of, and I believe he was a life member of the Currumborough Football Club, playing with them in his early years. I can tell you that he didn't like chocolate, but he had a very good sweet tooth. Put a plate of cakes or slices in front of him, and they'll all be gone by the time he had left to go somewhere else. And can I say, he had no time for Dan Andrews. And no, not because of the COVID situation. It was because he stopped the shooting of ducks. Well, ladies and gentlemen, enough from me. Family members are now going to come forward and share some stories about Jack. Prepare to be amused. Firstly, Bill Jeffs. Yeah, it's very hot up here, I'm telling you.
Drew.
Oh,
It's alright, I don't think I need it.
got to hold that too.
So Pam's mentioned quite a few things, so what will take place today, we'll try and compress 97 years into a few words, well, it'll be quite a few, and at various times other people will have stories to tell as well. So what I'm suggesting has been derived from all sorts of stories and yarns from all sorts of other family, friends and members and friends. And so, as Steve said, if I make errors in the detail, in the recount, I apologise in advance. But who's going to know the bloody difference anyway, because it was some of them for so long ago. Jack's life encompassed 26 premiers of Victoria and 25 prime ministers, starting with Stanley Bruce. He lived through the Depression, the Second World War, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, etc. And he's gone from ploughing with draft horses to living through the current technological revolution. Not that Jack engaged in it in any way. His life encompassed unbelievable change, but he didn't embrace it. He loved the simple pleasures, as we heard, and this was reflected back on his early life on the farm. There are a couple of examples. Because of the wind, we may reduce this a little bit, but we had great difficulty being able to establish at one stage Jack's identity for various reasons with various organisations, because he only had a bank book and people could not understand that that's all he had and that he paid everything by cash. So if you tried to get something done, they'd say, oh, well, look, refer to Jack's credit card. Well, he hasn't got one. Or refer to his computer. Well, he hasn't got one. Well, what about you do it on the phone? Well, he hasn't got one. What about a checkbook? Well, he didn't have one of those either. So the whole embracement of modern technology just didn't exist. And it was really difficult if you wanted, as Wendy could account, and so could Alan, in terms of trying to get his identity established if you didn't have something specific. And when he lost his licence, he didn't have a photo on any documentation. But fortunately, he still had his shooter's licence with a photo, and you could use that. As Pam said, he had developed the art of being a bachelor to another level. You had to check on his social calendar at what night he was available when he wasn't visiting someone for tucker. And I'll briefly go through school life. Most of these stories from Jack came from when he was relating stuff. We took some audio of some of his stories, and I went back and listened to a few of those things. He had 8 years of school at the Bellevue School. He left at the age of 14. And the school was on the corner of the Patterson farm and the Wilkinson's farm. He described at times, I'm not sure about this, he said that at one stage there might have been 60 kids at the school, but I doubt they'd fit. So I'm not sure about that. He described one teacher that they really liked it through those years, who liked cricket, and he would go out at recess and they wouldn't go in till 12 o'clock. But then one day Henry hit the ball and hit a big one, and it landed on the teacher's head, and that was the end of that, because they all went inside. He was a bit annoyed about that. And I said to him, "Do you remember the names of some of the kids?" And he said, "Yeah, this is just recently. I remember them all, the Hancocks, the Wilkinsons, the Harrises, the Irelands, the Morgans, the Herrings, the Frasers." The Hancocks, they were wild. That Alberta Johnson, she was one of the female teachers, she had to wrestle Harold to the ground one day because he was going to run away, and then she had to wrestle him back in the chair to stop him. And he was also really worried about, or concerned about anything related to fairness as far as Jack was concerned. He said that Alberta Johnson, she was okay, but she was false. She was going to give me the strap one day, and she never kept her word. She wanted me to give her the belt so she could strap someone, and I gave her the belt, and then she strapped me still, even though I'd given her my belt. And he said, I often got the strap. We all got the strap. He reckons that the teachers then, they just strapped you for fun. Now, the next category is early days, on the farm, etc. I'm going to throw it to Chris and Philip and Alan, who've got a range of memories that they're going to share with us. So I'll go firstly to Chris, if I may. Chris, if you could come up.
Right. Well, if I repeat anything, I'm sorry, but I wrote all this out and I'm going to read it all. Aye? Oh, yeah. Now you made it home. Righto. I'd just like to share a few more recollections of Uncle Jack, most of which relate back to my younger years. As I'm sure everybody knows, Uncle Jack spent the best part of his life hunting and fishing. He wasn't all that fussed about work. I remember Dad saying when Uncle Jack worked for the Lands Department, you could always tell what he'd been up to today because he still had grass all over his back from lying down in the paddock in the sun. My memory is a bit vague about a lot of these things, unlike Uncle Jack. Right to the end, he could still recollect almost everything about days gone by. When Uncle Ron was on the farm at Bellevue, we would go out there on weekends and with Jack Newton, Uncle Ron, Dad, Uncle Jack, Harry Hilberg, John Whitticombe, Jock Plymo, Flack McFarlane, Charlie Beach, to name a few. I know there were more, but I did say my memory wasn't that good. Later when Uncle Ron moved into town and Mum and Dad went out on the farm, nothing changed on the hunting side of things, except a few of us younger ones got to go too. Dad and Uncle Jack spent a lot of time together during those years doing what they, doing what they both enjoyed, hunting and fishing. Then the time came when our family moved on to the Western District, but that didn't stop Uncle Jack. He still made his way over there to see us, and we would still go out shooting foxes, ducks and fishing. It was over there that we took him fishing one time, and Kim and I said we knew a short, oh that's right, Steve was there too. We knew a shortcut home through the bush. Bad idea. We got Uncle Jack's car well and truly bogged. We managed to get it out, but as far as the shortcut, it probably wasn't that day. You could always tell you could always tell when Uncle Jack was coming through the bush or walking around the hills because of his habit of breathing out through his lips. The steeper or harder it got, the harder he would blow. For example, every second breath. He always had a story about a certain creek or a certain patch of bush or any one of us. And if he couldn't think of a name, that person became Who's-he What's It or Thingamajig. He told the story of when he saw a bunyip in the creek at the back of our farm in Bellevue. He told the story of the time he was setting up his fishing rod. He ran the line up through all the eyelets to the top of the rod, and when he finished he said the line just fell through the eyelets and back to the ground. At this point I wondered if he had finally decided to take up drinking. We were with him the day we were walking down a creek, me and Dad and on one side of the creek and Uncle Jack on the other. Uncle Jack said, "There's a bloody big snake skin over here," and he gave it a kick with his foot. Next thing he said was, "Struth, the bloody thing's still in it." He would always turn up at our grandmother's for a cup of tea and some of her magnificent sponge cake. Matter of fact, he would turn up at a lot of places for any sort of cake. Well, when Dad got crook and we left the farm and moved to the northeast, we finally started to drift apart. Like they say, all good things don't last forever. Dad passed away, but Uncle Jack would still keep in touch with us by phone. He followed the footy league that the boys played in and always knew where the team was and always asked how the boys were playing and what positions they were in. And then the time came when we would be talking on the phone and he couldn't hear us and we couldn't understand him until finally the only time we got to see him was the few chances we ever got to come down here. And that's about all I've got to say.
I didn't write any notes, so I don't need a stand. Yeah, we rely on my memory too. Now, I've got a couple of stories about Uncle Jack's fishing and shooting. Not as humorous as Chris's, but all the same. I used to tag along. I would have been 8 or 9 or 10 years old when we used to go out fox shooting. Jack Newton used to get his hounds, and we'd go off to a bush block somewhere, and all the blokes would all stand around the bush, and the dogs would start barking and howling and carrying on. The next minute a fox would fly out of the bush and down the paddock, and whoever was close enough to have a bit of a shot at him. And one day I asked my dad if I could try the shotgun, because I'd never fired a shotgun before in my life. I would have been about 10 years old, I suppose, and it was Pop Harris's, a double barrel with the old... Yeah, the hammers. Thank you, Alan. Yeah, with the old hammers. Well, he said, now make sure you tuck it into your shoulder really tight. I'm a left-hander. Really tight, you know. Well, the bloody thing blew my ass over tit. So I never did it again, ever. I had that gun for a long time at home, and when I had kids and everything like that, I thought, it's probably not a good idea to keep a shotgun around, so I gave it to somebody to look after. Anyway, I digress. On the fishing side of things, Dad used to do the milking early, and Uncle Jack had come out, and we go to a little creek called the Miniburn. Do you remember the Miniburn? Yeah, it was sort of about 1 kilometre past the Hallora football ground heading towards Struan. Anyway, I know it was called a Miniburn because it was that small and tiny that you could barely cast a line in. And we used to walk for miles up this paddock along the edge of the creek. Same thing, never saw a snake though, Chris, but I fell in one day, which was a bit embarrassing, and Jack hauled me out by the collar, and it was bloody cold too, I can tell you, cold and muddy. So that was a story. Does anybody remember Uncle Jack being in the old Currambara times with a 5-pound rainbow trout that he caught at the number 2 reservoir? So he's standing there holding this fish like this, you know, he's got his fingers in the gill and he's holding this fish, and there's a nice little story underneath it about Jack Harris catching this. It was a fishing competition with the Caringbah Angling Club. What they didn't mention was that he actually hooked it through the fin. Unbelievable. So, and he's hauled in this fish, a trout. So that's number 2's the one I think at the golf club, is it not? Yeah, okay. And finally, just got one little extra story. My mum decided it'd be a really good idea to buy one of those home barber kits. I don't know why. Anyway, Mum wouldn't cut my hair and Dad wouldn't cut my hair, but Uncle Jack said, well, I'll come out. If you put on a feed for me, I'll cut his hair. So he'd come out, but he didn't have a lot of expertise. Now, this is the days, well, I was about 10 or 11 or something, and the Beatles were the biggest thing in the world and all that sort of thing, and I wanted to have a bit long hair. Well, Uncle Jack didn't have any idea about a number 3 up the back and to trim on the top, thanks very much. He used to just turn the thing on with the full blade and give it the whole lot. But the best part of that story is that while Uncle Jack's cutting my hair, my sisters are putting curlers in his hair. And there's a photo somewhere, Julie. Is it? There you go. Well, that's the story of that. So here I am getting all my nice long locks trimmed off with Uncle Jack with curlers in his hair, thinking it's a great joke. So, yeah, he was a bit of a joker, wasn't he? And he enjoyed a good laugh with everybody. So, I wasn't going to get emotional. Sorry.
You sure? I'll do it with the footy. Yeah, right. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Chris. A lot of the stuff's been covered, so I'm just going to pick some of the things that we hadn't covered, that hadn't been covered by others. Jack talked about in those early days of his old man chasing him to go to Sunday school. His comment was, I never went to Sunday school, not that way inclined. I'd rather do something else, like nothing, or run around chasing rabbits. So Sunday school was held at the Bellevue School, and there was a lay preacher called Mr. Beard, and Jack described, as we were talking about the other day, about Auntie Cess, Arthur's wife, was on the organ. We spent a bit of time, I won't go into too much detail, but spent a bit of time talking about what work they did on the farm, particularly about loose hay and stacking it up on the haystack, and Alan might talk about some of those things and the experience of that. He said a lot of the time you'd run around with no boots, and you could put your feet in your piddle to keep you warm. It was a great way of getting rid of your chill planes. And in that conversation, Jack was telling me that winters were colder then, much colder. And he said if there was a change of wind, you'd often have hailstones. And he said it's warmer now, this is just recently. And Jack and I had been in a conversation about global warming and climate change. He wouldn't have a bar of it. He said it's all nonsense. And I said, Jack, well, if it was colder then and it's warmer now, doesn't that mean that there's a bit of global warming? And he just turned to me and said, well, who's telling the bloody story? He also suggested that every weather bureau, meteorological bureau across the world were cheating, and that the temperatures that they were saying that were rising, it was untrue, it was all a conspiracy, and they were telling lies for some reason, and you could not convince Jack otherwise. Now, the Beach family connection, Bradley's here, Rodney could not be here, and it was heard earlier about the connection with Charlie Beach. So he was one of his great mates, and when he passed away, how old were you, Brad? 11, I think, and Rodney was about 5?
Probably 9.
9, oh sorry. But anyway, he passed away, and Jack became sort of the surrogate surrogate, he wouldn't have been a farmer, surrogate father, and as Rodney said just recently, today rather, strongest male influence that they had for the family after their dad passed. And Rodney's got some great stories, I'll pass on some of those. And Rodney was great mates with Jack. They went out every weekend and school holidays from the age of 5 onwards, and it never stopped basically until they could no longer do it because of Jack's mobility. He was the best man at Rodney's wedding, and Jack was his godfather to his daughter as well. Got that? Is that correct? Yep. Now, in terms of Jack the Hunter, These are stories largely from Rodney, who spent quite some time chatting about him. They were hunting from the age of 5, and Bradley was there as well. And he can remember playing with the skins whenever the boys brought them home. Rod also remembered he went trapping with Charlie when he was about 4 or 5. And he can remember being out in the pitch black and with these massive traps that he was always worried about stepping in. Rod, Bradley's nodding his head. Yeah. Now, if any of those things were done now, you children would have been taken away and DHS would have stepped in for sure. But that didn't worry Jack and Charlie, evidently. He was a mentor, basically, in terms of the hunting wisdom, and he was really a local version of an Indigenous man who knew his country. He knew every bloody wombat hole and every place to find the foxes. Rodney also suggested he was an ethical hunter. You didn't go out shooting for this for the sake of it. You don't go and shoot something if you're not going to actually use it. Later on, there was another mate of Rodney, Zane, who he met in Melbourne, and Rodney would tell stories to Zane about this uncle of his, and Zane wouldn't believe it because Zane was a hunter himself and a shooter, and he couldn't believe that there was a bloke like that, and he said it was nonsense. But so Rodney invited him up, and sure enough, Zane met Jack, was suitably impressed by this wealth of knowledge, and became a devotee, and they went out quite a lot in the latter part of his life. He talked about making money in the early days from the skins, 20 to 40 bucks a scalp, and you didn't put shotgun holes in it because you didn't want to ruin it. Lynn was saying yesterday about you'd be driving along with Jack in the car somewhere, and then you'd see a dead fox on the road, and you'd want to get out and skin it or get the ears so he could make some money. So stop the car. Is that right, Lynn? Rodney mentioned another time when Jack had this bag that he'd been using, and they left it on the car, and they went off somewhere to chasing foxes, and he'd had some fresh skins in it. He'd forgot all about it, and he was whinging and carrying on about it. Anyway, when they got back to the car, the bag was gone, but not the skins. They'd been thrown on the ground, so Jack was happy. He didn't give a damn about the bag, but as long as those skins weren't taken away. He knew the landscape, he knew everything about the time of the year, the time of day, the wind, where the ducks would be, where the fishing holes were. And Alan was talking yesterday about watching the birds when he was in hospital, and he couldn't be outside. He'd watch through the windows, and he was telling Alan that, starlings walk, but blackbirds hop. And he'd do the same, talking about the jackass and how the kookaburra would walk in a particular way. But he didn't like fair weather hunting. You got up early and you went, regardless of the weather. And Willie and I experienced that going out with him one day. Never been so cold in my life. And Rodney tells the story that when you went out with him, you'd actually remove your clothing, so you're out of garments, you might have a jacket and a jumper or whatever, you'd leave them in the car and you'd head off with a singlet or a t-shirt, because you knew you were going to get soaked, so you may as well have something warm to get into when you got back. Jack didn't care. I used to go black fishing all the time, get up early in the morning. We had an experience, and Alan was talking about this too, that we only went out with him once, my son and I, and going down Coalition Creek, and we come down, there's this spot, there's a bit of water and there's bloody branches and blue leaf litter all over it, just this little pool there that's not covered with it. And he said to Willie, put your line in there. I'm thinking to myself, what's he talking about? No, how would you get a fish out of there? Sure enough, within about a minute or two, Willie caught a blackfish. Unbelievable. He tells another story about, this is Rodney, in early days, they were going down to Perks's farm. He said, Jack said to him, Rodney, when you walk past that big cypress and look up to your left, you'll probably see a fox up there, about 10 metres up. They climb, but if you shoot it, make sure it falls down, because we don't want to have to climb up there to get it. Alan? Yep. There's a lot of stories about the dogs, and Jill, and another one was Puddles. We won't go in detail there. But Rodney describes in those early days, in Jack's wisdom, they'd get somewhere in a thicket, and he'd say to Rodney, right, I want you to stand over there I'll stand over here, I'll put the dog in, and the fox will come out there. And Rodney would say he was remarkably accurate nearly every time. He would just know how things would work. Rodney also described him about navigating by the landscape. He never knew the bloody roads around the place, as we found out, but he'd just say, go left here, whatever. But in terms of going out in the landscape, he'd say things like, look, go down the gully, go past the second dam, but not the second tree, but the first blackwood. And then Rodney would say, you'd follow his instructions, but you were hoping you were doing the right thing, because then you'd sit there for an hour waiting for Jack to turn up, because he'd gone off in a different direction. But 9 times out of 10, he was absolutely accurate. And then there was a story that Rodney told, and again, Alan was reflecting on this, about permission to hunt or permission to shoot on the land. Well, Jack had permission from everyone. But unfortunately, Rodney tells the story, they were shooting somewhere and coming up the hill. Next thing, this farmer comes up on a quad bike, got a pickaxe over his shoulder, and he's fuming. Who the bloody hell are you? What are you doing here? And Jack told the story. He said, well, I've got permission to shoot here. Well, who from? I own the bloody farm. I didn't give you permission to shoot. Yeah, but I got it from so-and-so. That was a couple of generations back, but it didn't matter to Jack. As far as he was concerned, he had permission from everybody. Pam talked about the skull story. I'll elaborate because I think it's funny. Some people might like to hear about it. Rodney said that at one stage with he and Zane, Jack said, listen, can you blokes, if you see any cow skulls, can you pick them up and bring them back to the car? And this went on for quite some time until they had about 40 of them. And what was happening, Jack was collecting them, and at a certain point he would then, early in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock or 3 or 4 o'clock as Rod described, would go down the street and plant these skulls all over the place, until such time evidently there was a newspaper article about it describing what had happened. But it was just Jack, just a bit of mischief, something to do. Philip talked about the recoil of the gun, and recently there was a situation where they were out and Jack just collapsed. This is Zane and Rodney. And Rodney said, I thought he was dead. He just lay there, and he said, that's okay. He's died doing what he likes. But then reality set in, we had to get him out. So they were down Lockway, and the car was only about 200 metres away, and they had to get him through the brush. So Jack put his arm over Rodney's shoulder, and they struggled back to the car. But at a certain point, his legs went again, as he was stepping over a log, and all his weight went on the arm, and he damaged his shoulder quite severely, which lasted till he passed away. So the outcome of that was he had to set up all sorts of mechanisms to shoot, so he could still shoot with his crook arm, but then he had to go and shoot on the other side, which was difficult, and particularly with the recoil of the gun. So one day Wendy rings me to say, listen, Jack's just had a bit of a do back at home. He's not feeling too flash, and we need to go around. And Wendy was elsewhere, and we couldn't get in touch with anyone. So I popped around there to see how he was. And I thought, oh no, he probably needs an ambulance. So we rang the ambulance. The ambulance came, and they eventually sussed him out, and they said, oh no, we better check him out, maybe take him to the hospital. We'll go out the front, and we'll give him one of those tests they do to indicate an enzyme in the blood that indicates you've had a heart issue. And as they were doing that, they had to remove his shirt. So they removed his shirt, and that was not long after that first instance, and he was totally bruised, and it was black and yellow, looked really horrible. And then they shifted it down again, and on the other side was the recent recoil where he'd been shooting with the other shoulder. And they both just turned to me and looked at me as if to say, well, who's been belting this bloke up? And I'm like, no, it's a shooting thing. Okay, I was trying to explain it. They didn't believe me for quite some time. Okay, now I'll kick out of that. I'll go into his work history. It was mentioned about his lands department. He left school at 14, working on the local farms and getting rid of bracken, etc., with fern hook, as he would describe it. Got a job in the Lands Department. George Perks, that's Doug's brother, got him the job. He spent 14 years on the Lands Department with noxious weeds and all sorts of other things. He was very concerned about the stuff that they used in the Lands Department, looking back on it, the sprays, etc. And he was very concerned that they would have probably killed a lot of platypuses and little water rats with the spraying of blackberries they did down by the creeks. There was no protection for the workers, and it was the same stuff that they used in the First World War, the same stuff that the Germans used. And he talked about the poisoned apples they'd have to put out for the rabbits, and a substance called chloropryctin, which he said you could taste it in your lunch, but there was no protection for the workers. He said there were a lot of no-hopers working on the Lands Department. Didn't describe it. No, they weren't worth the money they paid. They came and they went. They were a bit backward, some of them, a bit slow. That was Jack with his no filter. He talked about running over a bloke one day. He was sitting on the mudguard of the car, the truck that they were on. And another bloke, Clive Harvey, I don't know if I got the name right, but he was a bit of an erratic driver, and they had the Fergie up at Cooks Hill. He was going a bit fast anyway, went through a fence, lost both the wheels, broke the wishbone, and smashed the Fergie up completely. And he'd start telling you, I won't go into details, but he'd start telling you who was a drunk and who didn't pay their bills. There was a story about another bloke who didn't pay his bills and he went to jail. And they had a bit of fun hiding blokes' lunch up in the trees. He said it was a great job, good blokes to work with. Just wander the creeks, do a bit of fishing, probably lay down. Steve was telling a story about one time they were fishing and Jack lay down, as he had a tendency to do, and blue tongue Steve. Blue tongue went to sleep on Jack. Jack went to sleep and the blue tongue's up there and wakes Jack up licking his nose. And he tells a story about a guy, and I don't know if the name's right, about Roy Wallace, because the spray that they had was somewhat flammable, according to Jack. And they're having a smoko, and this bloke was having a pipe. Anyway, a spark dropped off when he was lighting a pipe, and it dropped onto his strides, and he just burst into flame from all that stuff they had from the spray. But they couldn't get his boots off. So anyway, Jack said it was quite an interesting guy. The best thing about working there was when you're knocked off. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. Bear with me. That was working at the factory, so he did 9 years at the butter factory. And he was largely in the butter room and wrapping butter by hand. They had big lumps of butter, 56 pounds. And he was very concerned about the blokes there. He said they just hung out for overtime all the time. They didn't work hard. But he didn't enjoy that as much as other jobs. He said sometimes on Sunday it was no good working on a Sunday because all the local blokes would turn up to knock off the butter and the cream. And there was no one there, no supervisors there on a Sunday. They were a thieving lot, he described. And then he went to the Shire, and he had 16 years on the Shire. And I don't have many stories about that. Alan, do you have much to say about it? Although it was suggested that he liked the element that you didn't have to be supervised too closely on some of the Shire work. He did describe a story about knocking off Rocco's ladder one day and tying it to a tree, and Rocco didn't know where it was, so he called the police looking for his bloody ladder. Someone had knocked it off. In terms of Jack's local knowledge, we experienced this recently, and everyone has who goes driving with him. He knew everything. He knew wherever you were, but you'd go on a drive, and the next thing he'd say, "Oh, I'll turn left here," and he'd take you to places you never knew existed. He just knew everything. What took him recently, Alan, for a short drive turned into a couple of hours? Yeah. And it didn't matter if you said, "Listen, we've got to get back by 3." Didn't matter to Jack. He was going to go out and just check out everything. And then with regard to the staff at Carinya, they all loved him, and Jack would investigate, "Oh, you're so-and-so, and you're, oh yeah, I know, your grandfather was so-and-so, and they had that farm, etc." So he knew more about their family history than some of the younger workers did at Carinya. And as it was mentioned earlier, he had a powerful memory. Wendy described him doing a geriatric assessment, and the bloke said, look, I'm going to have to take your licence off you, mate, I'm sorry, but as far as I'm concerned, your cognitive ability is unbelievable. You'll never have Alzheimer's or dementia. Your memory is amazing. So in terms of his family, he loved them all, and was always interested in them. He loved popping around. You just turn up for a cup of tea and a sweet biscuit, and was always interested, as was reflected before. And at this point, I'll now throw to Lynn Bennett and Stan, who are here, to talk about his time at with the Lions. Okay, Lynn, if you may.
You right? Yeah. Hi everybody, I'm really honoured to be here today. Thanks Lynn and all the family. We just love Jackie to pieces, to bits. Yeah, but I'll get on with this Lions Club tribute at the moment. Lion Jack Harris joined the Currambara Lions Club in 1988. He remained a proud and supportive member for 33 years until his recent death. Jack was a highly valued and loved member who took part in all club activities. Being a bachelor, he enjoyed the good food aspect of Lions dinner and supper meetings, often being sent home with food. We know all about that. Jack received a Quiet Achieve Award after 12 years of service to the Currambara Club in the year 2000. When Jack was able-bodied, he liked to retell stories of his fox hunting and fishing escapades with his little foxy dog. He enjoyed making things from bits and pieces, often painting in bright colours to be given away. Sometimes
to the girls.
Pardon?
Given away to the girls.
Yeah. Sometimes these creations were quite a surprise. Jack's kind and friendly nature will always be remembered. That's from the Lions Club. And I would like to say a few things about my memory of Jack. We just loved him dearly. We would always look forward to him coming out for a visit. He'd always come out when it was around meal time. And we said, would you like to stop for dinner? Oh yeah, I'd love that. Had any leftovers? Would you like to take some leftovers home? Yes, yes. And we just miss him doing that, coming out. He was such a great guy. In the end, I think Wendy actually brought him out to visit us, and we took him home. And I remember him telling me about when the police were following up the Currambara Warrigal Road, and he said, I got pulled over. He said, I think I'm going to lose my licence. But unfortunately he did down the track. But yeah, we just loved him dearly. And his little dog, when he'd come out, he'd say, don't let that little dog out.
No,
he said, because the
that.
Little bugger will kill your chooks. So,
yeah, don't let him out, don't open the door, you won't have any chooks left, that's it.
So it's only short and sweet. I think you've been through everything else. And yeah, he was a wonderful man and we'll have wonderful memories.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's a great
thank
guy.
you. Thank you.
Great guy.
Right.
I'll probably fall over down there.
The next category is about Jack's footy escapades. We're going to throw to Alan now to talk about early days and everything associated with the footy.
Yeah, Uncle Jack's football. I can remember going to the football with Nana and Uncle Jack out at Arrawatta up the top of the gooseneck was their ground up there, and that was, I was only a very small child, so that was a long time ago. Then he went and played for Lock, and he played it for a few years at Lock, and then he came to Currambara and he played He played over 300 games with Carrambara, so his football career itself was very long. He won a league best and fairest, and we're not too sure what year it was because the trophy hasn't got the year on it, but he won a league best and fairest in the reserves, and he's a life member of the Carrambara Football Club. And I can remember Uncle Jack telling me that he was the inventor of the drop punt. He was the first one to use the drop punt, he told me that. So, and I wasn't in a position to disbelieve him, so. But he was a great little footballer. He was very quick. He couldn't kick the ball over a bloody cow dung, but that didn't matter. He once he got it, he was very accurate, but didn't go very far. But anyway, that was his footy career. And the only other story I was going to tell was about 2 years ago. He was starting to struggle a bit, and he'd lost his licence. And he said, rang me one day, and he said, "Can you take me fishing?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll take you fishing." So I went up and picked him up, loaded all his gear in the car. I said, "Where are we going?" He said, "Oh, you just go." He said, "I'll tell you where to go." I said, "Okay." Anyway, we finished up out the back of Warreen, and I drive down this hill, and I drive across the bridge, and when I looked out, there was nothing in the creek but weeds. There was nothing there, and I thought, "Oh, geez, I don't know where we're going." He said, "No, just pull in here." So I pull into this little driveway, open the gap for him, get him through. He's got his bag, and we had to walk probably 100 metres, 150 metres across a hay paddock to get to where he wanted to go fishing. So I just followed along, and when I get over there, he says, honestly, the creek was no wider than that. So I said to him, "Are we going to catch anything in here?" He said, "Oh, I don't know." He said, "But I have caught fish in here." I said, "Oh, righto." So we get organised and we throw our line in, and we're sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. He said, "I'm going to move." He said, "You go that way." He said, "No, I'll go this way." Well, honestly, the banks were like that, the grass was that high. I thought, he's going to fall in. There's no way known I can go off and fish somewhere else and just leave him here because he's going to fall in. Anyway, then he told me I was bloody useless. "If you're not going to go and fish somewhere else," he said, "you might as well not come." And I said, "Well, there you go." But anyway, that's my stories of Uncle Jack. He was a character of his own, and we all know, and we all loved him very dearly.
In terms of the footy too, one of the things that's indicative now is Peter has inherited many of Jack's genetic traits, and Peter being a speedster, as was Jack. But Pete was saying just the other day that Jack was really annoyed because he could never catch Peter. Is that right, Pete? Tried desperately, but never could. But Peter certainly inherited his speed. The other thing, sitting down watching footy with Jack, and local footy, and he'd be into it. The bloody players today, they can't kick, which is ironic considering he couldn't either. And why are they playing on this side of the ground? What's bloody wrong with them? They're not dedicated enough. They're too fat to run. And Jack had this thing about people putting on weight, and his perception was not always accurate. So next, I wanted to mention about his love of the Richmond Footy Club, as was been referred to before. So he'd go next door to his neighbours, Di and Chloe. Every Richmond game, they'd be next door, and he'd be treated like a king there. Put out all the pies, etc. Di, be right, have everything ready for him, and then high five on every goal, and all sitting up with all the Richmond gear on. It's a bit of a Townley curse, I think, that Richmond barracking, isn't it? They all seem to be Richmond supporters, but Jack loved it, and all the other games that were on, they'd go next door and he'd be sitting there. There's photos that we've got, we'll show, that we got from Di and Chloe that you can see later at the pub, that show his great time sitting there watching the footy at their house. We've also mentioned earlier about the arts and craft, and many of you who've been to his place would have seen his back veranda and the painting. Nowadays you would call that an installation. Jack just called it the back veranda, and he loved it. I don't know how bloody long it took him to do it. It was unbelievable. And fortunately now with the house, in the selling of the house, and now the way it's been dealt with Simon and Ellen and Lynn, etc., they've kept some of the artwork in terms of putting a frame around it, so it still exists, which is fantastic. But he loved his artwork, and there's some of it here. And he got it from the time with the senior cits, when he used his creativity. And Al was talking too about when they were fixing up the house prior to Simon taking over, there was decorations everywhere. On the windowsill there were pot plants, pot plants through cement with all sorts of decorations around them.
He used to cement everything.
Yep, cement everything.
All his windowsills, he had broken glass.
Broken glass on the windowsills.
All plastered into the windowsill.
Yeah. And Rodney actually referred to his magnificent creation of the dog food empty can wall that's since rusted out to buggery, but he thought that was fantastic. So all the empty dog cans.
The whole wall of the garage was done
Yeah.
with dog cans.
The whole wall of the garage, unbelievable. So anyway, most of the family members and others, everybody's got some of Jack's creations, and I'm sure you'll all look back on them now with great fondness.
If they
Whereas,
have them and they need some, Bill, I think.
oh, we've got a few, yeah. And he made me a couple of walking sticks. I had my knee replaced, so he gave me a couple of Collingwood walking sticks. But I can assure you, there's shotgun cartridges on the bottom of those, and you wouldn't want to put any weight on them. But as far as Jack was concerned, they were the best walking sticks going. Pam will refer a little bit later about some of Jack's sayings. I won't steal your thunder. But a couple of them that we picked up were, one was hen's wine. He talked about hen's wine. What's that, Jack? One drink too much of that and you'll lay anywhere. Another one was block and tackle grog. Well, what do you mean by that, Jack? Well, that's when you do your block and tackle anyone after drinking that stuff, because he was not a drinker. Another one was, in referring to some of his painting, he'd say, only a blind man would be glad to see this. And another one was, we were talking about yesterday, Lynn was referring to the spiders flying in autumn. And it won't rain in autumn until the spiders stop flying and they've stopped having the webs in the grass. Is that correct? Another one he used to say to me, he'd come round and he'd just have tea at our place, and sometimes we'd have to toilet him. And he had great delight in saying, "This is coming for you, Bill." And another one that everyone reflects upon is, once a man, twice a baby. Getting towards the end, nearly there. Memorable moments. It was one of the ones was referred to him earlier about, he changed his car, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he'd gone down, parked his car, but it wasn't the old car that everyone knew, and some bloke saw this fella park a car and jump over the fence heading down in the paddock with a shotgun over his shoulder, and he thought, crikey, this bloke's going to top himself. So the police were contacted. Next thing, the police are out, a helicopter's brought in, and after all of the hoo-ha, Jack and Jill emerged from the hills going, what's all this fuss about? They were just off to have a shoot. There's as mentioned, there was another incident, I won't go into details, about Jill and the chooks and the bylaws officers getting involved, and that ended up in court, and Jack was going to be charged, but anyway, we won that battle eventually. He also used to come around and have tea with us, and he wanted to watch anything on TV because we had access to some of the sports channels, and anything that moved. Loved watching cricket. Loved watching the bulls in the rodeos. And Wendy and I both be asleep, 11:30 at night. TV's on as loud as it possibly could. Jack's wide awake. He's having a great time. We're going, God, is he ever going to go home? And Leonie recalled that Jack would call in on a Sunday for a cup of tea at their place, and if they weren't home for any particular reason, the next week, first thing Jack would say, where were you last week? I called in, you weren't bloody home. So, nearly there, last bit. Lynn referred to the fact that it was mentioned earlier about driving he lost his licence because most of the time he'd be looking for ducks in the dam and he'd be weaving all over the bloody road. And he said that when the copper got him, he said that copper was he was a liar, that bloke. But Jack would have been weaving all over the road. And that's when he lost his independence, which is a great tragedy to Another story that was mentioned yesterday about he got his cart after he lost his licence, so he was in the cart, and because he had no awareness of technology, he just parked the bloody thing in front of the ATM and then charged off to do his shopping. But of course, no one could get to the ATM then because he parked the bloody thing in front of it. But he wouldn't know, he couldn't care. What's it mean? What's a hole in the wall to him? So unique traits and characteristics, most of those have already been mentioned. He was generous. He loved helping others. He was mischievous. He had those unfiltered comments, particularly as he was deaf, and he would shout to you. You'd be somewhere with him and he'd shout out loud, "Gee, that lady over there's put on weight, hasn't she?" He wouldn't even know who she was. And he'd always make himself comfortable wherever he went. When Tom and June's place, so Tom would get up out of his chair and Jack would immediately jump into it. Tom was not impressed. And couch at Doug and Myrtle's house, he'd just lay over that, everyone else would come in. He wouldn't move. He's on the couch, that'd be right off. And Alan was saying too yesterday that because Jill was always with him, he redesigned the back of the car. The dog took
all the seats out so the dog could run backwards and forwards from the boot.
Right, took the back seats out so the dog could run backwards and forwards. I always remember him with a belt on the outside of his the pants, and he never used the hoops to put the belt in. And the other comment was, whatever, don't bury me in a suit. I want to be buried in my painting clothes, and that's been followed through. And I said to him just recently when I was talking to him about, Jack, 90, this is when he was 90, just 95, I said, after 95 years on the planet, what have you learned? What's the meaning of life for you? He looked at me and said, not a thing. All right, yeah, of course, Jack, I apologise. So anyway, look, Jack was a wonderful man. He stepped to the beat of his own drum, and he represents a time that is now past. It was a life that was really well lived, and he's going to be missed by everybody. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who want to come and say a few words, or you're done? Okay. I'm all over the place here. So Jack Harris is gone now, but the memories of his life bring joy and pleasure. Talk about him often and remember all the good times. Remember the things you used to do together and the laughter and always the good feeling he brought through his smile and the twinkle in his eyes. Those memories are your best inheritance and no one can ever take them from you. Treasure them and use them often. Remember the conversations that you had. Remember some of his peculiar ways, sometimes funny or sometimes sad, but always with determination and sometimes a little stubbornness. Remember the stories he could tell of the past, of growing up, of all the hardships, of the little pleasures of living in such an amazing era. Think of the journey you have enjoyed with Jack throughout the years and experiences that you all shared. Remember him just as he was. A piece of him is in each of you. Cherish that and the relationship that you shared. In the days ahead, and especially today, talk with one another about him. Share your memories and talk about him now that he is gone, and in doing so he lives on in your own lives. Do you remember the last conversation you had with him? Maybe he told you about his early life. Remembering some of those golden years gone by. 96 years makes a lot of memories. Some of those he shared with you all, and in his sharing, those memories live on for yet another generation. And we mentioned the word before, mentor. Sometimes the word mentor is used to describe someone who teaches us or is a powerful example to us. Jack may or may not have been a formal mentor in your life, but most certainly, if you knew him, some of him is in you all. So Jack Harris, we honour your life and are blessed to have heard your laughter, seen your smile and felt your reassuring hand in ours. Our lives are richer for having known you and having shared in the love you gave us and the love that we felt for you. You are no longer bound by this world, but a part of it, no longer tied to one place or one time, but free. We give thanks for your life. We remember with gratitude your love and friendship and your sense of fun and adventure. And so we ask that you go now with all our love, as tenderly and reverently we yield your body to nature's keeping. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, at the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember you. At the blueness of the skies, in the warmth of summer, at the rustling of the leaves, in the beauty of the autumn, we will remember you. We will treasure your memory of your word and works, your character and quality, and will be forever enriched for having known your face. And so your kind and generous nature we commit to our memories, your love and human friendship we commit to our hearts. Thank you for all that you were and all that you gave. So love and light today on this your final journey. And now on behalf of Jack, I'd like to read this to you, as if he's talking to you now. I've finished all life has for me. I've been invited to the great hunting ground, where every day is a wondrous day to hunt. So fill your heart with every wish. Don't worry or feel sad for me, for I'm hunting with the master of the hunt. We will miss each other for some time, but in time you will join me and we'll be together once again. And that won't be too long, you will see, till we're together again, you and me. For all those that think of me know I am happy on a great hunt and happy as can be. Of those that wonder my missing, just tell them I've gone hunting. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes this service for Jack. And before we send him on his way, I'd just like you to remember the following sayings he was known to say from time to time, and these two just took my fancy. And the first one is, how's your belly with a pig bitcher? This is my favourite one. Never leave home without a jumper before Christmas. So you can use those this year. So tenderly, lovingly and reverently we commit the body of John Patterson Harris, I've done Harrison again, sorry, Harris, to nature's keeping. Jack will now rest here in peace for all eternity. And now as we say goodbye, there's only one song that we could possibly play in his honour.
Tigerland, a fighting fury, we're from Tigerland. In any weather you will see us with a grin, risking head and shin. If we're behind and never fight, we'll fight and win. For we're from Tigerland. We never weaken till the final siren's gone. Like the tiger of old, we're strong and we're bold. For we're from Tiger, yellow and black. For we're from Tiger. Tigerland. In any weather you will see us with a grin, risking head and shin. If we're behind and never fight, we'll fight and win. For we're from Tigerland. We never weaken till the final siren's gone. Like the tiger of old, we're strong and we're bold. For we're from Tiger, yellow and black. For we're from Tigerland.
And I do apologise for saying Harrison. I have no idea where that came from. I think it's the wind today. I'm sorry about that. I've done it wrong. I know it's all in front of me. Trouble keeping the pages together. Oh, God.
Patterson.